In the heart of Eastern Africa, beyond the dusty highways and crowded towns, there was a small village called Kijani. The village rested between rolling green hills and a thick forest that seemed endless. Red earth paths twisted between rows of mud brick houses, and tall baobab trees stood like ancient guardians watching over the land. Life in Kijani was simple. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, the sound of roosters crowing echoed through the village. Women swept the courtyards in front of their homes, children chased goats down the narrow paths, and men prepared their tools before heading to the farms. But despite the calm rhythm of daily life, there was one place in Kijani that everyone avoided. A place spoken about in hushed voices. A place wrapped in mystery and fear. The Forbidden River. The river flowed just beyond the forest, a slow-moving stretch of dark water hidden between thick trees and tall reeds. From a distance, it looked peaceful. The surface shimmered under the sunlight, and sometimes birds flew low over the water before disappearing into the trees. But the villagers believed the river carried a curse. No one could say exactly when the fear began. Some claimed it started many generations ago, long before their grandparents were born. Others said the curse came after a group of hunters vanished near the riverbank many years earlier. Whatever the truth was, one rule had remained the same for as long as anyone could remember. No one went near the river. Children were warned about it from the moment they were old enough to understand words. If you value your life, the elders would say, stay far away from the Forbidden River. The elders spoke of strange things that happened there. Fishermen who once tried to cast their nets into the water claimed they heard whispers rising from the river at night. Hunters said they saw shadows moving beneath the surface, as if something enormous lived below. There were even stories of mysterious lights glowing from the water after sunset. Some villagers believed spirits lived in the river. Others believed it guarded something ancient and dangerous. But no one dared to find out the truth. Except Lila. Lila was 14 years old, but she had always been different from the other children in Kijani. While most children were content playing in the dusty paths or helping their families with daily chores, Lila was always exploring. She climbed the tallest trees, wandered deeper into the forest than anyone else her age, and asked questions that often made the elders uncomfortable. She had bright, curious eyes and a mind that refused to accept things simply because someone said they were true. If someone told Lila something was forbidden, it only made her want to understand why. Her mother often shook her head whenever she caught Lila returning from another adventure. "You ask too many questions," her mother would say with a tired smile. But Lila didn't see curiosity as a problem. To her, the world was full of mysteries waiting to be solved. And none fascinated her more than the Forbidden River. Ever since she was a child, the stories about the river had filled her imagination. She had listened quietly as the elders sat beneath the old baobab tree in the center of the village, telling stories of the strange things people had seen near the water. Each story made the mystery grow larger, and the more people warned her to stay away, the more determined she became to discover the truth. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange and purple, the elders gathered once again beneath the baobab tree. Villagers slowly joined them after finishing their daily work. Some sat on wooden stools while others leaned against the wide roots of the ancient tree. Lila sat nearby, pretending to braid a piece of grass while quietly listening to the conversation. An old man named Mzibaraka, one of the oldest elders in the village, cleared his throat before speaking. "I saw it again last night," he said. The small crowd leaned closer. "Saw what?" someone asked. "The light," Mzibaraka replied. "In the river." Murmurs spread through the group. Another elder frowned. "Are you sure it wasn't the moon reflecting on the water?" Mzibaraka shook his head slowly. "No, this light came from beneath the surface." A silence fell over the gathering. "The river is restless," another elder said quietly. "That place holds secrets we are not meant to disturb." Lila's heart raced as she listened. A light beneath the water? Her curiosity burned stronger than ever. Later that night, after the villagers returned to their homes, Lila walked back with her mother along the narrow path leading to their house. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the village. Her mother carried a basket of cassava on her head while Lila walked beside her, deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "Mother, do you really believe the river is cursed?" Her mother stopped walking. She lowered the basket from her head and turned toward Lila with a serious expression. "Why are you asking about that place again?" "I just want to understand," Lila said. "Maybe the stories are just stories." Her mother's face hardened slightly. "Those stories exist for a reason." "But no one has ever actually seen anything," Lila insisted. "What if the river is just a river?" Her mother stepped closer and placed both hands on Lila's shoulders. "Listen to me carefully," she said firmly. "That river is not a place for curious children. Promise me something." Lila hesitated. "What?" "Promise me you will never go near the forbidden river." For a moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. Lila looked into her mother's worried eyes. "I promise," she said quietly. Her mother seemed relieved. "Good," she said, lifting the basket again. "Some mysteries are better left alone." But as they continued walking home, Lila couldn't stop thinking about the elder story. A glowing light beneath the water. What if the villagers had misunderstood what they saw? What if there was a real explanation? That night, long after the village had fallen asleep, Lila lay awake on her mat staring at the ceiling of their small home. Outside, crickets chirped softly. The moonlight slipped through the window, casting pale shadows across the walls. Her mind replayed the elder's words over and over. "I saw it again last night, the light in the river." The more she thought about it, the stronger her curiosity grew. Finally, she sat up. Her mother was asleep on the other side of the room. Lila stood quietly, careful not to make a sound. Her heart pounded as she reached for her sandals. She knew what she had promised, but she also knew something else. If she didn't see the river for herself, she would never stop wondering what secrets it was hiding. Slowly, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The village was silent. A thin path stretched toward the forest, and beyond that forest flowed the dark waters of the forbidden river. Lila took a deep breath. Then she began walking. She had no idea that before the night was over, her curiosity would lead her to a discovery that would change the entire village of Kijani forever. The night was unusually quiet as Lila walked along the narrow dirt path leading out of Kijani. Behind her, the village slept peacefully. The soft glow of dying cooking fires flickered outside a few homes, and the distant sound of goats shifting in their pens occasionally broke the silence. But with every step Lila took toward the forest, those familiar sounds faded. Soon, all she could hear was the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The moon hung low in the sky, large and pale, casting silver light across the landscape. It illuminated the winding path ahead just enough for Lila to see where she was going. Her heart beat faster with every step. She had explored the forest many times during the day, but walking through it alone at night felt completely different. The trees seemed taller, the shadows seemed deeper, and the silence felt heavier. Still, she continued forward. Curiosity pushed her onward. As Lila reached the edge of the forest, she paused for a moment. The trees ahead formed a thick wall of darkness. Their branches twisted together above the path like long fingers reaching across the sky. She swallowed nervously. For a brief moment, she thought about turning back. She remembered the serious look in her mother's eyes earlier that evening. "Promise me you will never go near the forbidden river." But the thought of the mysterious light beneath the water pulled her forward. Slowly, she stepped into the forest. The air inside was cooler, filled with the earthy smell of damp soil and wild plants. Moonlight filtered through the branches, creating shifting patterns on the ground as the wind moved the leaves above. Lila walked carefully along the narrow trail used by hunters and farmers during the day. Every small sound made her alert. A twig snapping somewhere in the distance, the sudden flutter of wings as a bird took flight, the faint rustling of something moving through the bushes. Her imagination began to play tricks on her. What if the elders were right? What if the river truly was cursed? She shook her head quickly. "No," she whispered to herself. There must be a logical explanation. She continued deeper into the forest. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, she began to hear something new. At first, it was faint, almost impossible to notice. But as she walked farther, the sound grew clearer. Water. The steady, flowing sound of a river moving through the darkness. Lila's chest tightened with excitement. She was getting close. Soon the trees began to thin, and the path opened into a small clearing filled with tall reeds and thick grass. Beyond the clearing, the forbidden river. Lila stepped carefully through the grass, pushing aside the tall stalks until the river came into full view. For a moment, she simply stood there. The river looked nothing like the terrifying place the villagers had described. It was wide and calm, its dark surface reflecting the moon like a long ribbon of silver stretching through the forest. Mist hovered just above the water, drifting slowly across the surface. Everything seemed peaceful. Too peaceful. Lila walked closer to the riverbank. The ground beneath her feet felt soft and muddy, as if the earth had been soaked by water for many years. She crouched near the edge, staring into the river. The water was darker than she expected, so dark that she couldn't see very far beneath the surface. A strange chill ran down her spine. She looked around. The forest behind her was silent. No animals moved. No insects buzzed. Even the wind had stopped. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Then something caught her eye. At first, she thought it was a trick of the moonlight. But when she leaned closer, she saw it again. A faint glow, deep beneath the water. Lila's eyes widened. The light was dim, but it was definitely there. A soft bluish shimmer coming from somewhere below the river's surface. Her heart began to pound. Mzibaraka was right, she whispered. The glow moved slightly, flickering like a distant lantern. What could it be? Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe there were strange minerals in the riverbed reflecting light. Or perhaps a hidden cave beneath the water. Or maybe something no one had ever discovered before. Lila leaned even closer to the edge of the river, trying to see deeper into the dark water. The glow became clearer. It seemed to come from beneath the riverbank itself, as if something hidden under the ground was shining upward through the water. Her curiosity completely replaced her fear. She stepped closer. The muddy soil beneath her feet shifted slightly, but she didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing light below. "What are you hiding down there?" she murmured. She crouched lower, reaching toward the water. That was when the ground suddenly gave way. The soft mud beneath her feet collapsed instantly. Before she could react, the riverbank crumbled beneath her weight. Lila screamed as the earth slid away. Her body plunged straight into the cold river. The shock of the freezing water knocked the air from her lungs. She tried to grab onto something, anything, but the muddy bank offered no support. The current pulled her away from the edge. Her arms flailed as she struggled to keep her head above water. "Help!" she gasped. But no one could hear her. The village was far away. Panic filled her chest. She kicked desperately, trying to swim back toward the bank. But the river's current was stronger than it looked from the surface. It dragged her farther into the dark water. Suddenly something grabbed her ankle. Or at least, that's what it felt like. She looked down in terror. But instead of a hand or a creature, her foot had struck something solid. Stone. Confused, she pushed herself upward and reached beneath the surface with her hands. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and hard. A wall. Underwater. Her heart pounded even faster. What was a stone wall doing beneath the river? The current pushed her closer to it. Then she noticed something else. Just beside the stone wall was a narrow opening. A dark gap hidden beneath the riverbank. The glowing light she had seen earlier was coming from inside that opening. It wasn't just a crack. It looked like a tunnel. Water rushed into it as the river flowed past. Lila grabbed onto the edge of the stone wall to steady herself. The current continued pulling her toward the opening. She tried to resist, but the slippery stones gave her no grip. Slowly, The rushing water dragged her closer to the dark tunnel. Her breathing became frantic. The glowing light inside flickered again. What was down there? Before she could decide what to do, the current suddenly surged stronger. The water pulled her straight into the opening. Lila gasped as the river swallowed her whole. The last thing she saw before disappearing beneath the surface was the faint blue glow shining from deep within the hidden passage, and the terrifying realization that the forbidden river had been hiding something far stranger than anyone in Kijani had ever imagined. The river swallowed Lila in an instant. Cold water rushed over her head as the current dragged her through the dark tunnel beneath the riverbank. The world around her became a blur of rushing water, spinning shadows, and muffled sounds. For a moment, panic completely took over. She kicked wildly, trying to swim back toward the surface, but the current was too strong. It pulled her deeper into the hidden passage like an invisible hand refusing to let her go. Her chest burned as she struggled to hold her breath. The darkness around her felt endless. Then suddenly, her hand slammed against something solid. Stone. Rough and slippery. The current pushed her sideways, and her head finally broke above the water. Lila gasped for air. Ow! She coughed violently as she clung to the stone surface, her lungs burning from the near drowning. For several seconds, she could only breathe, gripping the rock with shaking fingers while the water rushed past her. Slowly, her vision began to adjust to the darkness. But the tunnel wasn't completely dark. That same mysterious blue glow she had seen from the riverbank filled the space around her. It shimmered faintly across the wet stone walls. The light seemed to come from strange markings carved into the rock itself. Lila blinked in disbelief. Carvings. Everywhere. The walls of the tunnel were covered with ancient symbols etched deep into the stone. Spirals. Animals. Strange patterns she had never seen before. Some of the carvings glowed faintly, almost like fireflies trapped inside the rock. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly through the passage. She pulled herself onto a narrow stone ledge beside the rushing water. Her clothes were soaked, and her hands trembled from the cold. But the fear she felt was slowly being replaced by something else. Wonder. The tunnel stretched deeper into the earth, curving slightly out of sight. Water still flowed along the center, but the ledge gave her just enough space to move forward. Lila stood slowly, steadying herself against the carved wall. Her fingers traced one of the glowing symbols. The stone felt ancient, older than anything she had ever touched before, even older than the baobab tree in the center of the village. She walked slowly along the ledge, examining the carvings as she moved. One showed a group of people standing beside a large river. Another showed tall structures that looked like towers or temples. And then she saw something that made her stop. A carving of people wearing crowns. Not simple crowns like the decorative ones used during village ceremonies. These were elaborate, decorated with long feathers and strange shapes. The figures looked powerful, important, almost like kings. Her heart began to race. Could this place have belonged to an ancient kingdom? The elders in Kijani often told stories about forgotten African civilizations that once ruled vast lands before disappearing. But those stories always felt distant, like myths passed down through generations. Standing here, in this glowing tunnel, those stories suddenly felt very real. Lila continued walking deeper into the passage. The sound of rushing water slowly faded behind her as the tunnel widened. Soon the narrow ledge expanded into a solid stone floor. The air inside felt damp but strangely calm, and the glowing carvings became even more detailed. Some depicted large animals, elephants, lions, crocodiles. Others showed groups of people carrying tools, building structures, or gathering around large fires. It looked like a record of an entire civilization carved into the rock. Lila moved slowly, her eyes wide with amazement. "How could no one know about this?" she murmured. The villagers had lived beside this river for generations, yet none of them had ever discovered what was hidden beneath it. Or perhaps, someone had. Maybe that was why the elders warned everyone to stay away. The tunnel curved sharply ahead. As Lila stepped around the bend, she suddenly froze. The narrow passage opened into something enormous, a massive underground chamber. Her mouth fell open. Towering stone pillars stretched from the floor to the high ceiling above. Each pillar was covered with the same glowing carvings she had seen in the tunnel. Broken pottery lay scattered across the ground. Large clay jars, pieces of ancient tools, fragments of stone statues that had collapsed long ago. Dust covered everything. It looked like the ruins of a forgotten city buried beneath the earth. The glowing carvings cast soft blue light across the chamber, creating shifting shadows that danced along the walls. Lila stepped forward slowly, her footsteps echoing through the cavern. Every direction she looked revealed something new. Stone platforms, collapsed walls, carved statues of warriors and animals. This place had once been alive with people. Now it was silent, lost to time. She approached one of the fallen statues and brushed away some of the dust. The statue showed a tall figure holding a long staff. A crown rested on the figure's head, and beside the figure was a carving of the river, the same river flowing above her. Lila felt a strange chill. The river wasn't just near this place. It was part of it. Her eyes scanned the chamber again. Then she noticed something on the far wall. A massive stone carving far larger than the others. Curiosity pulled her closer. The carving showed the river flowing through a large city. Buildings stood along the riverbanks. People gathered near the water. But the next part of the carving showed something different. The river rising, flooding the city, people running in fear. The final part of the carving showed the city completely underwater, buried beneath the river. Lila's heart pounded. Had the river destroyed this ancient kingdom? Was this place once a thriving civilization before some kind of disaster buried it forever? She leaned closer to examine the final symbols carved beneath the image. They looked like a warning, but before she could study them carefully, a deep rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The ground vibrated beneath her feet. Lila looked up sharply. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The rumbling grew louder. Then she heard it. Water. Rushing water. She turned toward the tunnel she had entered through. Her stomach dropped. Water was pouring into the chamber. The river above must have risen. Or perhaps the current had shifted. Either way, the tunnel was flooding fast. The water spread quickly across the stone floor. Within seconds it reached her ankles. Panic shot through her chest. "I need to get out of here," she said aloud. She looked around desperately for another exit. The tunnel behind her was already filling with water. If it flooded completely, she would be trapped inside the chamber. Her breathing quickened. Then something caught her eye. Behind one of the tall stone pillars, partially hidden by shadows, was a narrow opening in the wall. It looked like a staircase. Stone steps carved into the rock, leading upward. Hope surged through her. She ran toward the stairs as the water continued rising behind her. The chamber floor was already knee-deep. The rushing sound grew louder as more water poured through the tunnel. Lila grabbed the side of the staircase and began climbing as fast as she could. Step after step, the staircase twisted upward through darkness. Her legs burned from exhaustion, but she kept climbing. Below her, the sound of rushing water echoed through the passage. If she slowed down, the river might catch up, and the lost ruins beneath the forbidden river would become her grave. But Lila refused to stop. Not now. Not when she had come this far. She climbed faster, driven by the terrifying realization that the secrets she had uncovered tonight were only the beginning. Lila's feet pounded against the narrow stone steps as she climbed higher into the darkness. Her breath came in sharp bursts, echoing through the twisting staircase carved deep inside the rock. The damp air clung to her skin, and the faint blue glow from the carvings below slowly faded behind her. But the sound of the rushing water did not fade. It grew louder. The underground chamber beneath the river was filling quickly, and the flood was chasing her up the staircase. She didn't dare look back. Every step felt like a race against time. The staircase spiraled upward through the stone like a giant coiled snake. The walls were rough and ancient, scratched with faint markings that looked similar to the glowing carvings she had seen below. But these symbols did not glow. They were dark, old, and worn down by centuries. Lila ran her hand along the wall as she climbed, trying to steady herself. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. The fall into the river had drained her strength, and the icy water still clung to her clothes. But fear kept her moving. Behind her, the sound of water surged through the tunnel. It splashed violently against the stone steps below. If the river reached this staircase completely, she would have nowhere left to go. The steps suddenly became steeper. Lila grabbed onto the rough wall to pull herself upward. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Step, step, step. The staircase twisted again, and for a moment everything became completely dark. Then, a faint beam of light appeared above her. Moonlight. Her chest filled with hope. "There's an exit," she whispered breathlessly. The opening above grew brighter as she climbed closer. Finally, the staircase ended at a large stone slab blocking the way. Lila stared at it, confused. It looked like a door. A massive flat stone perfectly fitted into the rock around it. She pushed against it. Nothing happened. Her panic surged again. The water was getting closer. She could hear it rushing up the staircase now. She pressed her shoulder against the slab and pushed harder. Still nothing. The stone felt heavy. Too heavy. For a moment, she feared she might be trapped. Her eyes scanned the edges of the slab. Then she noticed something carved into the stone beside it. A symbol. A spiral surrounded by small animal shapes. It looked similar to the glowing carvings from the chamber below. Lila pressed her hand against the spiral. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a deep grinding sound echoed through the staircase. The stone slab slowly shifted. Dust fell from the edges as the heavy door slid slightly open. Fresh air rushed through the gap. Lila pushed with all her strength. The slab moved just enough for her to squeeze through. She scrambled out and collapsed onto the ground outside. Cool night air filled her lungs. She rolled onto her back, gasping for breath. Above her, the sky stretched wide and dark, filled with thousands of stars. For several seconds, she simply lay there, trying to calm her racing heart. The terrifying rush of water below was now muffled by the thick stone beneath her. She had escaped. Barely. After catching her breath, Lila slowly sat up. She looked around, trying to understand where she was. The forest surrounded her on all sides. Tall trees swayed gently in the night wind. But something was different. The river was nowhere in sight. She stood up and walked a few steps forward. Through the trees, she could see a faint glow in the distance. Village fires. Her eyes widened. She wasn't on the same side of the river anymore. The hidden staircase had brought her to the far side of the river, deep inside the forest where no villager ever traveled. Lila turned and looked back at the place where she had emerged. The stone slab had already slid shut again, blending perfectly into the rocky hillside. Without knowing exactly where to look, no one would ever notice it. The secret entrance was completely hidden. Her mind raced with everything she had seen. The glowing carvings, the massive underground chamber, the ruins of an ancient city buried beneath the river. It all felt unreal, like something from a legend, but she had seen it with her own eyes. Suddenly, a distant sound snapped her attention back to the present. A low rumble echoed across the forest. Thunder. She looked up at the sky. Dark clouds had begun gathering, slowly covering the stars. A storm was coming, and if heavy rain fell, the river could rise even more. The hidden ruins beneath the water might disappear again. Lila realized something important. No one in the village knew the truth about the Forbidden River. They were afraid of it because of old stories and rumors. But the river wasn't cursed. It was hiding something. Something ancient. Something important. She needed to tell someone. But who would believe her? If she returned to the village claiming she had discovered an underground kingdom beneath the river, most people would think she was imagining things. Still, she had to try. She turned toward the distant glow of the village fires and began running. Branches brushed against her arms as she pushed through the forest. The ground was uneven, filled with roots and stones hidden beneath the grass. Several times she stumbled, but she kept moving. The storm clouds above grew thicker. Lightning flashed faintly in the distance. Wind began to sweep through the trees. Lila's legs ached, but she refused to slow down. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, the forest began to thin. The familiar shape of the baobab tree appeared ahead. She had reached the edge of the village. Most of the homes were still dark. Only a few small fires burned in the courtyards. Lila walked slowly now, trying to catch her breath. Her wet clothes clung to her skin, and mud covered her legs. If anyone saw her like this, they would immediately know she had been somewhere she shouldn't have gone. As she approached her home, she noticed something unusual. Several villagers were standing outside, talking quietly. Lanterns lit their worried faces. Her stomach tightened. Then she heard her mother's voice. "Lila." Her mother rushed toward her the moment she stepped into the light. "Where have you been?" she asked, grabbing Lila's shoulders. Her voice trembled with fear. "I woke up and you were gone." Other villagers gathered around them, staring at Lila's soaked clothes. "What happened to her?" someone asked. "Did she fall into the river?" another whispered. Lila hesitated. Her promise to her mother echoed in her mind. "Promise me you will never go near the forbidden river." But the truth was too important to hide. She looked up at the worried faces surrounding her. Then she spoke. "I went to the river." Gasps spread through the group. Her mother's expression filled with shock. "You did what?" "And I found something," Lila continued, her voice shaking slightly. "Something hidden beneath the water." The villagers exchanged nervous glances. "What are you talking about?" an elder asked. Lila took a deep breath. "There are ruins under the river," she said. "An ancient city buried beneath the forbidden river." For a moment, no one spoke. Then several villagers began shaking their heads. "That's impossible," someone muttered. But Lila stood firm. "I saw it," she said. "And if you come with me tomorrow morning." Her voice grew steady. "I can show you." None of them knew it yet, but by sunrise, the secret hidden beneath the forbidden river for hundreds of years would finally be revealed. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the hills surrounding the village of Kijani. A thin golden glow stretched across the sky, chasing away the darkness of the night. Roosters began crowing, and smoke rose gently from the first cooking fires of the morning. But this morning was different. Instead of the usual quiet routine, the entire village buzzed with whispers. Word had spread quickly. Lila claimed she had discovered something beneath the forbidden river. Some villagers believed she was simply frightened after falling into the water. Others believed she might have imagined the entire thing. But curiosity was stronger than doubt. By sunrise, nearly half the village had gathered beneath the giant baobab tree. Elders sat on wooden stools while younger villagers stood in small groups, discussing what they had heard. At the center of the crowd stood Lila and her mother. Her mother still looked worried, but she had remained silent since Lila told her story during the night. Finally, Mzee Baraka, the oldest elder in Kijani, rose slowly to his feet. His walking stick tapped against the ground as he looked around at the gathered villagers. "We have heard the girl's story," he said calmly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He turned his eyes toward Lila. "You claim there are ruins beneath the forbidden river." "Yes," Lila replied. "And you can show us where to find them?" "I can." The elder studied her face carefully. He had lived in the village for more than 70 years. In all that time, he had heard countless strange stories about the river, but never had anyone returned claiming to have seen something like this. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Then we will go," he said. A wave of nervous whispers spread through the villagers. Some people looked uneasy. Others looked excited. Within minutes, a small group formed to follow Lila to the river. Several elders joined, along with a few hunters and curious villagers. Even Lila's mother decided to come. The group began walking toward the forest. The morning sun filtered through the trees as they followed the narrow path. Birds chirped overhead, and the cool air carried the scent of wet earth after the storm during the night. But the closer they came to the river, the quieter everyone became. The stories about the forbidden river had lived in their minds for generations. Now they were finally approaching it. When the group reached the edge of the clearing, several villagers stopped walking. The dark water of the river flowed slowly ahead of them. Mist hovered over the surface, just like Lila had seen the night before. "This place has always brought trouble," one villager muttered. Baraka turned toward Lila. "Show us," he said. Lila nodded. She led them carefully along the muddy riverbank to the exact place where she had slipped into the water. The ground was still soft from the night storm. She pointed toward a section of the river where the water moved strangely near the bank. "It's under there," she said. The villagers leaned closer. At first, they saw nothing unusual. Then one of the hunters squinted. "Wait," he said. "I see something." Just beneath the surface of the water, the faint outline of stone could be seen. A flat wall hidden beneath the riverbank. Gasps spread through the group. "That's not natural," another hunter said. Carefully, two of the hunters stepped into the shallow edge of the river. They pushed aside the reeds and muddy soil covering the area. Slowly, the hidden opening began to appear. The same dark tunnel Lila had been pulled into the night before. For several seconds, no one spoke. Even the elders stared in disbelief. "It's real," someone whispered. Baraka stepped closer to the water's edge. His old eyes studied the stone wall carefully. Then he noticed something carved into the rock. Symbols. Ancient symbols. His face changed instantly. "I know these markings," he said quietly. The villagers looked at him in surprise. "You've seen them before?" someone asked. Baraka nodded slowly. "When I was a boy, my grandfather used to tell stories about an ancient kingdom that once existed in this region." The villagers leaned closer. "He said there was once a powerful city built along a great river," the elder continued. "But one day the river rose and swallowed the city whole." The villagers exchanged stunned glances. "You mean?" one of them said. "Yes," Baraka replied softly. "I believe this may be the lost city my grandfather spoke about." Lila felt a rush of excitement. The glowing carvings, the giant underground chamber, the ruined statues. Everything she had seen was real, and now the entire village was seeing proof. The hunters carefully climbed out of the water. "We need to explore inside," one of them said. But Baraka raised his hand. "No," he said firmly. "This discovery is far greater than we understand." He looked back at the villagers. "We must inform the authorities in the city." Some villagers looked disappointed. But the elder was right. This was not just a hidden tunnel. It was something much bigger. Within days, news of the discovery spread far beyond Kijani. Officials from the nearest town arrived first, then historians, then archaeologists. Soon, vehicles filled with researchers began arriving in the small village. The quiet community that had once feared the river now watched as experts carefully studied the hidden entrance. Special equipment was brought to explore the underground chamber safely. When the archaeologists finally returned from their first exploration, their faces were filled with amazement. One of them gathered the villagers together beneath the baobab tree. "What you have discovered here," the archaeologist said, "is extraordinary." The villagers listened silently. The ruins beneath the river appeared to belong to a civilization that existed more than 800 years ago. Gasps spread through the crowd. It was likely a powerful kingdom that disappeared after a catastrophic flood changed the course of the river. The archaeologist smiled. "And the person who led us to this discovery." He turned toward Lila. "Is this young explorer?" The villagers looked at her with pride and disbelief. Only a few days earlier, the Forbidden River had been a place of fear. Now it was the site of one of the most important discoveries in the region. Visitors and researchers soon began traveling to Kajani from faraway cities. The village that once avoided the river now stood proudly beside it. And every time Lila walked past the water, she remembered the night she ignored her mother's warning. If she had stayed home that night, if curiosity had not pushed her forward, the lost kingdom beneath the river might have remained hidden forever. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from asking questions no one else dares to ask. And sometimes, a single moment of courage can change the story of an entire village.